Howdy, I'm Kate Kavanaugh, and you're listening to the Mind, Body, and Soil podcast, where we're laying the groundwork for our land, ourselves, and for generations to come by looking at the way every thread of life is connected to one another. Communities above ground mirror the communities below the soil, which mirror the vast community of the cosmos. As the saying goes, as above, so below. Join me as we take a curious journey into agriculture, biology, history, spirituality, health, and so much more. I can't wait to unearth all of these incredible topics alongside you. Hello and welcome to the Mind, Body, and Soil podcast, the groundwork podcast. It doesn't matter what we're calling it anymore. I've had the kind of week that brings your life into sharp focus in terms of what matters and what matters less and what doesn't matter at all. I am your host, Kate Kavanaugh, and on this podcast, we explore the threads of what it means to be humans woven into this earth, and I am so excited to bring you this week's episode with me. I am me, and we are going to talk about movement through a lot of different lenses, tying together some threads that we've been tugging at on the podcast around moving our bodies to resources and what the movement part of that equation might entail, my own personal journey with movement, some facts, figures, tips, statistics, and ideas. And we're also going to be exploring some of the practicalities of what it means to move through hard times in life, to move through chronic illness. I'm hoping that this can be a big, comprehensive boon episode for all of us, and I'm recording it in what I think is a big portal, a bit of a crucible for me, as it were. And I actually want to begin there. As we talk about resources, one of the resources that we haven't talked about and really should is money. And this podcast has been a labor of love, of devotion, of absolute joy on my part. It has also represented a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. We are almost, as of this recording, 109 episodes in, and it is my crowning achievement in life. And I think that I wish that I had made more of an effort to monetize this podcast earlier. I felt shy about that piece of things. And I think I also felt a burden around what it would mean to try to offer more when this podcast takes, oftentimes these episodes can take 10 to 20 hours of my time and devotion to kind of put together. And I have found myself in a very tight spot. If you have ever loved this podcast, now is the time to give. This past week, my husband lost his job and we lost our main source of income. There is just a tiny bit from the farm, from this podcast, barely. And it came at a particularly inopportune time for us. And so if you have the bandwidth to give, and I really mean that, now would be the time. And I am offering several different ways to give that I'm hoping will grow and develop a little bit more over time. And these three ways are Patreon. And what I'm doing right now is because I'm looking at jobs, I'm looking at freelance work and what my future might hold. I don't want to offer anything on these platforms that I'm not 100% sure that I can give. And so I know typically, Patreon has these tiers where you get more benefits as a listener. And what I'm asking right now, though this will evolve, is for you to just give just because. And so I have some different tiers there. I have my Substack, which I have some writings that are worked up and will be ready to go soon. And you can get a monthly subscription there, and that helps support me. And I also have a link to my PayPal account if you just want to give a one-time tip. I will tell you that it has to be my legal name, and my legal name is not Kate Kavanaugh. And so you will never hear me say this again. But when you go through that link, my name is Catherine Dittmer. So yes, that is me. This is hard. This is hard for me to ask, and I want to be really clear that if this isn't a season, and I know it isn't for so many of us, for you to share resources with me, that one of the ways that you can give in a no cost to you way is by subscribing to the podcast wherever you listen and leaving a rating and review. That really helps people find it, as well as sharing an episode with your friends or family. That's how podcasts spread, and it is my deep hope and also belief that this podcast will continue no matter what iteration of job my life ends up in. I've been This is hard for me to ask, and it's funny because this episode is we're going to talk a lot about load and what it means to carry a load and pick up a load and lift a load. And I was reminded as I sort of entered into this that we're not meant to carry everything alone. And so this is me asking you to help me carry my load insofar as you are able, and to help me. We've come back to this David Graeber quote time and time again, that the ultimate hidden truth of the world is that it's something that we make and could just as easily make differently. And I've been really driven to reimagine how we organize and think about and consider our world. And this week it came into really stark relief that I have failed to reimagine my own world. And so hope you can help me do that. We've come back to Rilke several times on this podcast with Andreas Weber, with Francis Weller, in some other spaces as well. And so I thought I would offer this poem. I know a lot of us are struggling right now, to myself and to you. So this is from Rilke. Quiet friend who has come so far, feel how your breathing makes more space around you. Let this darkness be a bell tower and you the bell. As you ring, what batters you becomes your strength. Move back and forth into the change. What is it like, such intensity of pain? If the drink is bitter, turn yourself to wine. In this uncontainable night, be the mystery at the crossroads of your senses, the meaning discovered there. And if the world has ceased to hear you, say to the silent earth, I flow. To the rushing water, speak, I am. That was Rilke, and I appreciate you letting me share vulnerably. I know that so many of us are in this situation, and so it's just with the utmost of tenderness for everybody's circumstances that I make this ask. We have some really exciting, deep episodes coming up, including I got my all time dream number one guest to say yes to the show. And that will be happening later on. And I appreciate you, dear listener, more than you could ever know. You have made this podcast dream a reality for me. And I know that we can continue to co create this together. Um, One of the things that I learned in the fire that this past week has been is just how much this podcast means to me, and how much I am willing to change my life to make sure that it can be accommodated in whatever new iteration my life becomes. So thank you. Hey, it's Kate, and I just want to say something really quickly. If you love this show, supporting the brands I partner with is one of the best ways to help me keep making it. Right now, I'm in a season where I'm carrying a lot and lifting heavy in every sense of the word. When you use my affiliate links or check out the sponsors I genuinely love and use, you're helping me keep this work going. With that, I want to talk about the sponsor of the show, Redmond Real Salt. I talk a lot in this episode about movement and about muscle. But the truth is, muscle doesn't fire without salt. Electrolytes matter, not just for performance, but for recovery, for hydration, for feeling like you're even in your body, something we talk a lot about throughout this episode. I've used Redmond Real Salt for over 7 years. It's mined right here in the USA from an ancient Sundance Sea in Utah and contains over 60 plus trace minerals to help fuel your endeavors. Even better, because I know people are moving to get this salt to me, I've been on Redmond's production lines, met their miners, and let me tell you, this is a company that cares deeply about its people. And that makes this salt taste just a little bit sweeter. When it comes to fueling movement, their Relight hydration powder is a go-to. I am forever obsessed with the pina colada flavor, and I've been dabbling a little bit with their pre-workout as well and really enjoying it. If you're building strength like I am in this season, this is the mineral foundation I keep coming back to. Just salt. You can support the podcast and get 15% off your order at redmond.life with the code mindbodysoil_15. And now back to me. We often start etymologically, and there's a reason for that because our language gives shape to our movement in life. I think language is movement. It is something that is organic, that is in flux and is in flow. And I think by sometimes getting back to those root meanings, something is illuminated that we might not have expected. And so when I was thinking about movement, I came back to that really original meaning, which was a change of position, a passage from place to place. Could not be more apropos for me this week. Also, exercise, start, instigation, right? The beginning. But its root is mu, which means to push away. And in next week's episode, you're going to learn about the origin of the push up and what it means to push away. And as I was thinking about what movement means to me, one of the things I have often considered is that I often need a hard surface to push against to know that I am real, to know that I am here, and to begin to feel myself and refine myself in space, which is something we're going to talk a lot about on this episode. And I think what I mean by that, because this is a little bit hard to describe, I was a really lonely child. I was an only child and I didn't have a lot of contact with others. I was not very accepted in my social circles. My family life was hard. And I think that there was a part of me that felt that I was not real. And the only way that I could really triangulate myself within the concert of life behind me, which was sometimes the nightmare of life, and I mean around me, not behind me, was to push against something, to push against a bike pedal, to push against my own 2 feet as I walked or rollerbladed, and to really begin to define that self in relationship with other. And in this, I always come back to Andreas Weber, who I mentioned a little bit ago. Great podcast episode with him, in that the boundaries of what we consider a self, and I know we've talked a lot about this on the podcast, that self and other is a very porous, very diaphanous concept because we are interconnected into this web of life. And all of these nutrients and atoms are flowing between organisms constantly. And I really needed that feedback to understand me and to know that I was here and corporeal and made of something and that I mattered. And so movement has meant everything to me in my life. And I'll get a little bit into that as we go on. Before we get into my story, I want to tie us into this big thematic overture that we've had the past year that we'll continue to lean into, because this has really become my thesis statement, right? And this comes from me. We used to move our bodies to resources, and now we move resources to our bodies. And that simple shift in perspective has radically changed and shaped our world. And so within this, we've explored resources like corn, wood, oil, food, and some of the systemic supports that get them to where we are, the shipping industry, the cold chain, a little bit about trucking, and a little bit about the sort of economic systems from commodities to markets that craft what we think of as the world, and coming back to that David Graeber quote. And we've really gotten stuck in this thing, right? It used to be that we moved our bodies to kindling for fuel, to materials for shelter, for clothing that were furs and leathers, and that we moved ourselves also to food in a somewhat migrational pattern prior to the dawn of agriculture about 10,000 years ago. But even then, especially if you read David Graeber's Dawn of Everything, we were very playful. And agriculture is something that was adapted slowly over time, where sometimes we would become set in place for a season or two, and then we would go back to that more slow-matism is a word that a new friend introduced me to recently. And so that sort of slow-matic lifestyle. And within that, we were a part of the cycle of life. Our waste went back to the earth, our clothing degraded back into the earth, and we were really a part of that cycle. And I think that agriculture begins to create a pretty big break, and the end of these supply chains that we haven't gotten as big of a chance as I would like to explore is waste, and how that does, or and you'll see this in future episodes when we talk about plastics and forever chemicals, does not break down and become a part of the earth. And so there was this sort of embodied participation. And within that, all of those movements really shaped the human body for millennia. And this is going back even before Homo sapiens. As we came out of trees and as brachiating animals, moving that really fascinating, beautiful shoulder joint, the glenoid fossa, in a specific way, and down into savannas where we were walking. Estimates put it between 15 and 25,000 steps a day, that we were occasionally sprinting to hunt, but usually just sort of long walks, carrying loads in terms of food, in terms of fuel. And I think actually one of the biggest loads, and when I say load, I mean a weight that we're carrying beyond just our body weight, was actually carrying our children. And that would have been a really big piece of that, and later carrying some vessels and things like that. And those movements deeply shaped and gave feedback to how our bodies evolved. And so to not explore that movement piece of what it means to what it meant to move our bodies to resources, and now that we move resources to our bodies, we have become increasingly more sedentary, especially as we have, even 100 years ago, a lot more farming was taking place, which would have involved a lot more movement. We didn't have the internet and things getting shipped to our doorstep, where we really need to move very little. And I think the average amount of steps per day that we move now is about 3,000 to 4,000 steps. And remember that, estimates put early Homo sapiens before the agricultural revolution at between 15 and 25,000, essentially. And I'm sure it varied, and that's important to remember too. And so this ability to move resources to us has changed our bodies just so completely. Thank you so much for supporting this show. I hope that you've hit the like and subscribe button, left a rating and review. But another great way to support me is to support some of my affiliates. And I want to talk about Behay footwear. So for me, movement starts in my feet. Whether I'm walking or thinking about the points of contact between my foot and the ground when I'm lifting, it all starts with feet. I've been wearing Behay shoes for almost a year now. They're Revive shoes for walks, runs, and like hikes, and they're Rediscover shoes for big hikes and even farm work. And there's a reason. They're minimal, they're profile shoes that let you move how you were designed to move. Behay's shoes aren't just minimal with a zero drop and a nice wide toe box. They also have grounding technology so you can reap the full benefits of an electrical connection to the earth. With Behay shoes, that connection is both biomechanical and energetic. The sole's flexibility has been unparalleled for me, especially I have a Morton's neuroma that sometimes fires up if I'm in the wrong footwear, and it is never hurt in these shoes. They have helped me gain full connection when I'm walking, and I've also been lifting in them. I have a home gym, so I usually lift barefoot, but if I needed to wear shoes to a gym, these would hands down be the ones. So whether you're walking, lifting, and for everything in between, I highly recommend Behay shoes. You can check them out at behay.co. That's BAHE.co. And use the code KATE10 at behay.co, which was BAHE in case you missed that, to get 10% off. Support your feet and your movement and support this podcast with every step. And now back to me. And this is something I really tugged at on my episode with Katie Bowman. I think that her essay book, Movement Matters, does a lot of it's an incredible explanation. I'll read this from her just to bring this piece back in. Our daily life is composed of a lot of seemingly innocuous ways we've outsourced our body's work. One of the reasons I've begun focusing just as much on non-exercisey movements as I do on exercise-type movements is that I feel that the 10,000 outsourcings a day during the 23/24ths of your time hold the most potential for radical change. Be on the lookout for these things, to avoid the movements necessary to walk around to all the car doors, or just to avoid turning your wrist, or to avoid gathering your tea strainer and dumping the leaves and cleaning the strainer in your dishwasher. You have accepted a handful of garbage, plastic, and a future landfill, and a battery. To avoid the simplest movements you have, without realizing it, required other humans somewhere else in the world to labor endlessly, to destroy ecosystems and wage war for your convenience. Sedentarism is very much linked to consumerism, materialism, colonialism, and the destruction of the planet. If you're not moving, someone else is moving for you, either directly or indirectly, by making stuff to make not moving easier on you. I come back to this a lot in how I think about this. And so our sedentarism is a direct result of this shift in the way that we move resources around the world. And our sedentarism has also radically changed our bodies. And this is where I want to talk about shifting baselines. Because I think I have this question that I don't see talked about enough in the literature, which might just mean I'm reading the wrong literature. And I do want to be really clear about that, is around the idea of shifting baselines. Now, we've talked a little bit about this in the episode with Dan Egan. I think we talked about this some with John Valiant, but I want to give us a definition of what a shifting baseline is. So this is a concept that was coined by marine biologist Daniel Pauly in 1995 to describe how ecological degradation is normalized across generations. Each new generation accepts the current state of an ecosystem, or for our case here, a body, as the baseline, forgetting how things once were. And this creates this sort of creeping amnesia that hides the extent of long-term change. You know, and I'll give this example. I was standing in a forest with my friend Rob. I'm a part of the board of agroecology and sustainable forestry center. It's about 3,500 acres in Vermont. And we were standing in the forest and we were talking about what it meant to restore that forest to a place that Rob and I have never seen, because this area started to be logged in the 1700s, maybe a little bit earlier. And so any old growth stands of forests are really now defunct. There are just some little pockets, but that Rob and I have never seen what that ecosystem looked like, and our parents haven't seen it, and our grandparents and their parents haven't seen it. And so we're looking at what it might mean to restore something that we've never even experienced, that we can't even imagine. And so to bring this back to movement and our bodies, I think in the context of this conversation, a shifting baseline means that we've gotten so used to dysfunction. And this is going to manifest itself in a lot of different ways, whether that's back pain or fatigue or certain mobility loss or the way that we birth children or how much rotation we have in certain joints, how much strength we have, our ability to squat because we sit in chairs and on couches so much, that we treat it as normal. And I think this is even reflected in the scientific literature, that scientific literature hasn't even seen a quote unquote human body that is accustomed to the movements that it evolved to do. And I think that we can look at some hunter-gatherer tribes and some first peoples that still have their life ways more intact, whether that's the Hadza or the Kung. But still, there is this aspect of we're not really seeing our bodies as they were meant to be. And so some of the things that we describe as normal are not normal. They are just common given this very sedentary context that we have found ourselves in. And I think that this is just absolutely fascinating. And one of the guests I really wanted to have on and haven't been able to secure is Dr. Susie Spurlock, who has a great movement program we'll talk about a little bit later, called Supple Strength, Move Your Bones. She had some great Instagram posts over the past bit of time talking about, she talks a lot about pain and moving with pain, which is something that I'll discuss too in the context of chronic illness, but also in terms of issues like meniscus tears or disc degeneration that we might all have, but they might not be symptomatic for us. And so, for example, about 35% of middle-aged and older adults have meniscal tears that are visible on an MRI, but are asymptomatic. They never cause pain. Now, some do cause pain. Disc degeneration, that a decent amount of even 20-year-olds, but even 30, 40, it increases with age, and I'll link to these posts, have disc degeneration that does not correlate with pain. And then again, there is going to be symptomatic meniscal tears and disc degeneration. But one of the things that I think is really interesting about this is that it really made me wonder, because obviously when we're talking about 1/3 of the population, this is a presentation of quote unquote normal at this point. But I think that it is normal for today's sedentary bodies. While disc degeneration, meniscus tears absolutely would have happened prior to the agricultural revolution or even prior to 100, 200 years ago, I don't think that they would have been as common because our bodies would have been exposed to the evolutionary movements that makes them our bodies. I think that the shifting baseline, and again, these are shifting baselines that we don't even know what a human body might be capable of because it's been so long since we've moved in a way that is aligned with our evolutionary impetus, right? I mean, even agriculture is particularly hard on a body in a way that hunting and gathering would not have been in terms of lifting, in terms of repetitive motion. Strength really does start from within. Towards the end of this episode, I talk a little bit about how I fuel my movement. And honestly, one of my movement whys is so that I can lift big, heavy, full cast iron pots and pans in the kitchen with ease. I know, that's so wild. I love Field Company cast iron. Like your body, it gets better the more you use it. It rewards consistency with more seasoning and flavor. I've been cooking with Field Company pans for years. They're American made, beautifully light for cast iron, thanks to their machined out bottoms, which sounds like something else, but it really just means that they have nice, thin bottoms like vintage cast iron. They are heirloom pieces meant to last, and they are made from recycled iron. I use them daily, whether I'm searing meat, crisping sweet potatoes, or cooking eggs for the thousandth time. And hey, I was thinking about this, and I think they could double as a little kitchen kettlebell or dumbbell. So I don't know, maybe you're killing two birds with one stone. Field Company is offering 10% off your purchase when you go to fieldcompany.com/Kate_Kavanaugh or hit the link in the show notes today. And this helps support the podcast and help you fuel all of your movement. And now back to me. But another piece that I want to bring into this, and we talked about this a little bit on the episode with Kat Bohannon, and I'm hoping to talk about this again, is childbirth. And I want to say at the outset that none of this information is meant to shame in any way. It's just sort of me collating some really interesting ideas. And I also want to acknowledge that the Western medical system is really great at certain things and has absolutely brought down both mother and child mortality rates. And so by no means am I saying that. But in the US, about 33%, about 1/3 of all childbirths are C-sections. In Brazil, that number is over 50 and over 90 in private hospitals. And even the WHO wants to see something closer to 10 or 15%. And I think that there's a lot of reasons for this that this podcast is not going to dive into. But I think that one of them is the amount of shifts we've seen in the female pelvis and musculature, the pelvic diaphragm, because of the way that we do or do not move anymore. And so all of this is to say that our baselines of birth, of injury, and of aging, of even aging, are skewed by this normalization of dysfunction due to sedentarism. And I think there was a great Tara Couture, who's been on this podcast, had a great post about her husband, Troy, who's in his 60s. He looks like a Viking. He's very muscular. And she talks about how often people just haven't seen a man that age in that kind of shape, but that she finds that it was probably more like what we had experienced prior to all of the sedentarism. And so I just kind of wanted to give us that overarching context as I get into a little bit more of a personal story around my movement journey, which I hope will give you all some hope, some ideas, and for me to share a little bit around my why. So I'd lifted before, but I had never committed to a consistent practice. And about 9 months ago, I committed to a consistent practice, and my body has completely transformed. It is wild. We will talk about it. So we've talked about this. I was an only child. I didn't really have any friends. I had a pretty tough home life. I was overweight. I never played sports, even though I went to a school that was very, very athletic. I struggled to learn how to move my body. I needed more cues. I needed, when learning how to even throw a ball, somebody to describe the inner mechanics of it. I would tell you that I have had, at least in the past, I think it's gotten better over time, rather poor interoception. And I think a lot of that is that I spent a lot of my childhood wanting to dissociate from my body. I did not want to be connected to it. I experienced pain. The onset of my chronic illness happened very early, around the age of 4 or 5, though it would go undiagnosed for another 25 years. I experienced a lot of pain and a lot of discomfort, both emotionally and physically. And so I wasn't in my body and I was in my head. I needed somebody to intellectualize movement for me. But that being said, I still moved a lot as a kid. And I did movements that made sense to me. They were walking. My parents were really big walkers. If my parents did anything right, it's that they really modeled movement. My father was much older. He walked every day into his 70s. He died when I was 13, and he was 74, and he walked up until the week before he died, and I would often walk alongside him and my mother. I would sometimes be rollerblading. Once I learned how to ride a bike, which took me a hot minute, I would ride my bike all the time, even before school, and I loved that time out alone and in nature. It was really where I think my first connection, my first parent, really, Mother Nature, became clear to me. Like I felt very held in that space, and so it meant a lot to me. But I couldn't find movement in the context of team sports or what I was seeing as a kid. And then, fast forward to my teenage years, it was the early aughts, and, it was coming off the heels of Kate Moss. Heroin chic was in. I definitely wanted to move my body. I had lost a lot of the sort of baby fat that I had carried for so long. And I got into yoga, a little bit of weightlifting, and of course, walking. I continued to walk. And even through my late teens, when I was doing a lot of psychedelics, getting into some trouble, my favorite thing to do was to take LSD and walk like 15 miles, which just makes so much sense to me when I look back on my life. And then later in and then a lot of yoga. And one thing that yoga really deeply gave me was a sense of cueing, of somebody helping me find that interoception for myself, which I really needed to feel into my body as somebody who still to this day is prone to sort of just dissociating and floating away. And again, for good reason. Like, I really wanna call out that that is, as far as I'm concerned, in many ways, a healthy coping mechanism when one has dealt with chronic pain their whole life. And so this is gonna be a piece of this story too, is that, I have autoimmune atrophic gastritis and some complications from it. And so I have dealt with constant stomach pain as my body attacks my stomach lining, deep, gnawing, horrible, debilitating stomach pain most of my life. And it goes in phases of flare up, which I've also had to manage with moving. And with that, because your parietal cells in your stomach are responsible for both making stomach acid, hydrochloric acid, releasing hydrogen into the lumen of the stomach, which makes it hard for me to digest food. I take exogenous stomach acid. They're also responsible for creating intrinsic factor, which helps shuttle B12 into your cells. And so when I was finally diagnosed, right around the time that I turned 30, I was eating, oh my gosh, probably like 2 ounces of beef liver a day. I know, really funny that I became a butcher, right? Not lost on me. That my body was literally telling me exactly where I needed to go, and it was towards meat, and just still could not get out of bed very much, except throughout all that time when I had what was really defined as chronic fatigue, I would continue to go for walks. And a lot of this was because I find that movement really helps my brain. And the way that I explained this in an Instagram post the other day is that I can be a little bit of a thoroughbred in that if I don't run out my anxiety, I will become destructive. And it really the struggle of movement, the pushing against something, the moving through difficulty, through hard times, up that mountain, because we haven't even talked about hiking, really helps with my neurochemistry, and I need it. And so even when I was at my sickest, I was still moving. 20s, I started hiking. Out here on the East Coast, when I moved back here, I am just a 15-minute drive from some incredible hiking in those forests that I was talking about earlier, and climbing mountains, and have done increasingly longer hikes, walks, and some sort of endurance stuff, and sort of toyed with the idea of eventually doing some more ultra type things. And that movement really did save my life, and I've said this before, walking saved my life time and time again. I've returned to it, especially when things were at their absolute stickiest, whether it was my late teens, my mid to late 20s, through illness, and, I mean, again, while my husband was gone the past 2 years, I was walking, between 5 and 10 miles a day because it really kept me on my toes. If this episode moved you or helped you reflect on your movement story, please consider supporting the show by sharing it, rating it, or by supporting one of the sponsors I mentioned in the show notes. This podcast is not backed by a network, it's not paid for by guests, and it's made by me. It's researched by me. The guests are pitched by me. The books are read by me, and it's edited usually by my husband. Links to support me through Patreon, Substack, and PayPal are in the show notes. And of course, some of the best support that you can give me is free. It's by leaving a rating and review or sharing an episode with a friend. Thank you so much, dear listener, for being in here with me. And now back to me. One thing I want to say about that chronic fatigue space is I pulled this from an Andrew Huberman post where he talks about how movement begets more movement. And I really find this as somebody who, when I go back and do an autoimmune flare up, sometimes feel really tired, and I can fall into what I call rest holes, where I don't feel like I want to get up, but I find that what I usually need is to get up and to keep moving. So in this post, he says, not motivated to exercise? Consider this. Movement, exercise involving limbs and especially core muscles increases your levels of energy. How? A neural circuit from your motor cortex to your adrenal glands causes release of adrenaline, epinephrine, which activates receptors on your vagus nerve, which in turn excites brain areas like the locus ceruleus that release norepinephrine and equal increased brain activity and alertness. It's a brain to body to brain arousal loop. Movement, exercise, gives you energy. And what I have to say about that is that I can tell you that that is true. Movement gives us energy, and I think that it also gives us a training ground. And one thing that we're really going to get into here is how much movement has meant to me metaphorically. I have talked about this with walking and hiking, but what it means to move through something, to witness how far you're able to come one step at a time. And there's a reason why that platitude is so popular. And it's because sometimes the best thing for us is to move, to take it just one step at a time, and then to look back and go, oh my gosh, look how far I came. But what I've discovered with lifting is that this is also about my ability to carry a load, to pick up something heavy and carry it for myself, to do that rep after rep, and to increase my strength and my ability to squeeze more lemons when life hands you a lemon grove. My life has certainly done that just this week. And I actually credit the last 9 months of lifting for really giving me context for just how dang strong I am. And with that, I want to give a little peek at something that our guest for next week says. Her name is Bonnie Swee, and her book On Muscle, The Stuff That Moves Us and Why It Matters, is out next week. And she had these 2 beautiful quotes that I'll read in the intro of her episode, but I really want to reiterate here. Okay, this is from Bonnie. Every push up was a note to yourself that you were capable of more than you were the day before. These days, when so much of life feels out of our control, something that concrete and tangible, however incremental, feels like a small victory. During the writing of this book, I've been doing a lot of push ups and thinking about what it means to do them. Lately, I've come to understand that what I learned from my father was not just to lift heavy things, but to lift myself. She goes on to say that for all its nobility, the pursuit of mightiness remains grounded in the body and all of its appetites. But the strength community's insatiable curiosity about the human body is something I find surprisingly moving. To know one's own strength. I've come to understand the meaning of these words not as a binary statement, an I do or an I don't, but as an ongoing process of discovery. Muscles matter. They allow us, in an observable way, to see what we can do. Though you may not initially know what you're capable of, you have vast reservoirs of potential waiting to be tapped for just the right moment to be revealed. I know that I am very much in that moment for myself right now, where all of the ways that I have thought about my strength, both literal and metaphorical, are being called on as I'm asked to step into the next iteration of my life and to hang on with a fierce grip because I have been hanging on, right? I have a hanging bar. I have literally been hanging on. I have literally been working that grip strength, which we might need to have a little side note about. And so I know I can grab this, I can hold it, I can pick up this massive, impossible load that life has given me, and I can carry myself capably into the next season. We can do hard things. We can do hard shit. Side note on grip, I always think it's funny. So, grip strength is correlated to health as we age. And it's really funny because people take this out of context and they'll buy these little squeezy grip things to improve their grip strength. But to me, what that correlation means, that grip strength is correlated with better health outcomes as we age, is that when we pick up heavy things, whether that's on a farming job or in the gym, we are thus increasing our grip strength, making it a proxy for how much lean muscle mass our body is carrying, which really helps us as we age, since we lose. I think the statistic is about 1% or 5 to 8% every decade of muscle mass as we get older past the age of 30, 35. And so if you're not actively working to build muscle, you are losing muscle. And then we want to maybe not just maintain, but to get bigger, to get stronger. And so there's a really big metaphorical sense of what it means to carry a load. And within that, I think that there is also one thing that I've learned in lifting is that sometimes that load gives us feedback, that we can learn more about our interoception and about how we respond to stress, to hard times, maybe even about the clarity that we can find about what we want in the world when we are given something really heavy and we are required to push to carry. And I'm finding that right now. Everything has come into a sort of focus and clarity that I'm actually excited about this next season of my life, as fucking unreal scared as I am too. And so I really believe that load can give us a feedback and something that we can really go into. And I've thought a lot about why I move. And I want to pose that question to you too, dear listener. Like, why do you move? Why might you move if you're not moving already? And I want to talk a little bit about why I move before we talk about how I've been moving. I move to age well. We just talked a little bit about sarcopenia and how much muscle loss occurs as we age. I am 36 years old, and I know that going into the coming decades, I don't want to have to build this skill. I just want it to be a foregone conclusion, something that is a part of my routine so that I can maintain and gain muscle mass as I go into my late 30s and into my 40s. I do this so I can farm with ease, so that I can farm with ease into old age. And this is another thing. I want agency as I age. And that agency will come with having the muscle mass to support myself to be able to bend, squat, lift, turn, rotate. I want to be able to carry heavy things, both literally and figuratively, as we've talked about. I'm doing this for my health, whether that is blood sugar balance, stability, strength, the incredible feedback loops that happen between your muscles and every system inside your body. I am doing this because it's also fun to do with my husband. I usually train and work out with my husband. It's a good way for us to spend some quality time together. And then there's this last piece. And this last piece is so naughty in today's world. It's a little bit taboo. And this last piece is I train for vanity. I train because I like the way it makes my body look. And this feels like something you are not allowed to say right now, but it's true. Just having a little sip of coffee here before I dive into vanity. I don't want to pretend that vanity isn't a part of why I train. I enjoy the way that my body looks with more muscle on it. And I saw something recently that alluded to when we see bodies that we like and refer to them as toned, we're often talking about the muscle mass that's sitting underneath the skin that is from lifting heavy things and seeing that muscle grow in hypertrophy. And so I like seeing that muscle. And I actually think about the muscles that I'm training. I really lean into a pretty functional training program that's just about movement and about mobility and about strength. However, I do think about a couple of little places on my body that I want to make look good. And so, for example, I've spent a lot of time training my deltoids. That's that upper part of your arm where your puff sleeve would be if you're a woman. I love puff sleeves and I want to build myself a little perma puff sleeve. I love the line from my abdominals into my pecs. I actually thought that that line that some women had on their chest was just something that certain body types had because of the way they are because of genetics. But now I have that line because I've trained my pecs and I've trained my glutes so that I have a nice peach that I enjoy and I love a little pop of hamstring. And so I've thought a little bit about that in my training and what I want. And I think that we give vanity a bad rap because vanity is very motivating in the present, right? I'll tell you, my husband has kind of come along on this training journey with me as I've created some of these training programs for us and for him. And he's not really motivated by the long-term stuff, by the aging well, by the health things, but he's very motivated by what he sees in the mirror and how quickly that has changed for him. And so aesthetics can be motivating and it can also be something that we can just totally set aside. And so feel free to just like put this part in the trash if that's what you need. But the other thing that I will say as somebody who has suffered from chronic illness for the last most of my life, the last 30 plus years, is that as I've built this new body and it does feel completely new to live in here, this act of creating some of these muscles and thinking about them has felt like co-creating with my body when constantly chronic illness has left me feeling like I am at war with my body. But this feels like partnership and it feels creative. It feels fun. There's a sense of levity in it. It is not my body working against me, which is, it's not true, but it is often how chronic illness feels. This is a sort of partnership. And that has been really meaningful to me. And it's been really fun to see these differences. And with that, I want to talk about that because my body feels different. There are times when I don't even recognize my body, when I wrap my arms around myself to give myself a hug, or when I'm laying in bed and my hands brush up against my thighs. I can't believe how just 9 months has completely transformed the way that my body feels. Like, these are not my arms, these are not my legs. Um, and it's really neat to have that feedback. And with that, as I have built muscle, both visibly, but also just built muscle, I have gained a better sense of that interoception that we're talking about. Where when I started lifting, I sometimes struggled to make that mind muscle connection that actually does change the way our muscles grow. You really do want to have that active mind muscle connection, or MMC, for hypertrophy. But I've learned how to move my body and engage my muscles in different ways that have changed my walking, that have changed my farming, that have changed my posture and the way that I sit. And so it is with more training that I gained more interoception. Again, that load is creating a feedback loop for me. And oftentimes I've found that, well, I was really hesitant to do this. Let's start here. I was really hesitant because I felt that you needed a trainer, you needed to do this absolutely perfectly, and I don't want to downplay the risks. There are risks, check with your doctor, all of the things that I should be saying right now, right? But I felt like I needed absolutely perfect form and the right coach to be ready to do this. But I have found that with some good programs, and we'll talk a little bit about some of those programs that I've found and used, that I had an opportunity to learn as my load increased, to have that feedback loop that under a heavier weight that was still within that range of safety, it gave my body enough feedback to turn on from years of dissociation, to be like, oh my gosh, there is my glute. I can feel it. There is my hamstring. There is my posterior chain. I am feeling this and it feels amazing. And that has only deepened, and I can only imagine that in yet another year I will have an even greater interoceptive sense of what is happening within my body and how to move my muscles and to sit differently and to walk differently and move differently. And I think that it was that sense of everything needing to be perfect, my lifting form, all this stuff, that really kept me from diving in, as well as, I live 20 minutes from the closest really teeny tiny rural funky little gym, which is great, but even that 20 minutes feels like a lot to me. I live 50 minutes from anything really appreciable. And so all of this was going to have to be done at home. And I do see a lot of home lifting stuff, but not as much as I would like. And I really, Josh and I started with just a little bit of equipment, just some kettlebells and some dumbbells, and slowly expanded our equipment as we recognized our need, or true desire for it. And our little home gym, which occupies a very tiny room in our house, has grown, and we've kind of made some equipment that we need in some sort of funny ways. And so now we have a trap bar and an Olympic barbell and plate weights, and we have a plyo box that we made in the wood shop. And we turn it into a bench. Eventually I'd like to get a bench, but we turn it into a bench with one of those big exercise balls and kind of some weights pressing up against it. It's pretty funny. You can see me post about it on my Instagram sometimes. Um, And we do a lot of landmine movements, which I love, these sort of explosive combat type movements that I actually think are very functional and are very much the way that our body moves. And so a landmine attachment for an Olympic barbell is when it has a pivot point on the floor that it kind of sets into. We actually just nest it into the corner with an old towel, but it gives you that rotation. So that point in the corner is fixed and you're lifting and you can load the front of it and do some pretty cool movements. And so we've just added from Craigslist and from Marketplace and just kind of built our collection as we needed it. And this has been really incredible because it means that 3 to 4 times a week for an hour to an hour and a half each time, I can just pop into my home gym and do my workout. And that sense of convenience makes it really easy for me, especially as I have navigated now over the last 9 months of lifting in addition to all of my hiking and walking, which totals about, I don't know, it depends on the week, 10 to 14 hours a week of movement. Through a really the worst flare up I've ever had of my chronic illness, through some emotional struggles, and now through this absolute gutting, flaying open of my life that I am right in the midst of, and it's been right there, and I know that it's going to change again, and I also know that I'm ready to change with it. I like to work out at 3 p.m., but if I need to get up at 5 a.m. in order to do this is something that I'm devoted to and absolutely will not stop. So and it's funny because I think a lot about how people become weightlifting evangelists and how funny it is, and I remember thinking that before I got into it, and now that I'm into it I'm like, "Oh, I totally see how this kind of evangelism ends up taking place." So I want to talk about what's happening otherwise and also how I'm managing this a little bit with chronic illness. So, walking has formed I think, the core nutrient of my movement forever. And I think that's great because, again, to harken back to the beginning, we used to take a whole lot of steps and now we don't take very many steps. And walking is incredible because sometimes it's referred to when it's fancy as low intensity, steady state cardio, right? And there are different zones of cardio that represent where your heart rate is sitting. But I've found that for me, oftentimes higher zones can throw me into an autoimmune flare, especially when I'm tender, especially when my nervous system is activated, when I'm really in a sympathetic response like I am right now, I have to be a little bit careful about things like running or high intensity. And walking has always formed that baseline that it's truly scalable. And I want to make a connection here because walking is really scalable in that you can push pretty hard and go fast and kind of get some of those endorphins that you might need as a thoroughbred that needs to run out your anxiety or you destroy stuff. But you can slow down, you can oscillate between speeds on a walk, you can stop entirely. I do a lot of hills here, a lot of incline walking because I'm in a hilly region and I also enjoy it. Or you can go with something flat. You can just go around the block. And I have found, and what I have not seen in social media, which again doesn't mean it doesn't exist, is that lifting is also very scalable for me and my chronic illness. That when my flare was at its absolute worst, I could scale back weight. I could scale back reps or sets or the length of my workout. And I still built muscle. And this was even, I had to kind of draw back on my protein intake because of my stomach. I still built muscle. And everybody says, well, it has to be getting heavier every week and you have to be increasing in this sort of linear way. And for those of us humans, which is really all of us that aren't linear beings, it really doesn't have to be that way and it can be really scalable. But walking taught me so much about scale and also about moving through discomfort. And I know I've recorded an episode about this before, one step at a time, that I'll try to link in the show notes, but it was back last fall that it was released. And I love walking because, it's not flashy, it's not fancy, but it's super regulating. It's fantastic for you. It's incredibly scalable. It's allowed me to either just be with myself and my thoughts and nature, or to listen to books and podcasts, or to listen to music to really move me. I know that I referenced on Instagram this past week Caroline Nelson, who's been a guest on this show, has a great trick that I have put into my trick pile, where she keeps a playlist of songs that bring her a lot of joy, and she doesn't listen to it very often so as not to become habituated to the dopamine, to downregulate the dopamine response that occurs when we're listening to a song that we're super into. Um, and and just drop in when you need it. And I did that this week and was reminded of how incredible that is. So I will occasionally listen to music, and that's actually one of my biggest suggestions for how to get moving if you don't want to. And I did a whole post about this. So I had a question box on Instagram, and somebody asked if I could share tips to get myself moving when you're really struggling. And so, really quick, as we talk about this, since we mentioned music, I just want to talk about my top 8 tips for really getting moving. Number 1, schedule it. All of my workouts, walks, hikes are on my schedule at the beginning of the week in my book. It's the book. And I hew to that schedule. There is wiggle room, things do come up, things do happen, but mostly it's decided and I go. Number 2, I lay out clothes and shoes the night before because it's even easier. I find that moving to gather things, especially in the morning, is a hurdle for me. So I do that the night before. For me, staying warm is a big one, especially in a cold climate. Cold makes movement feel difficult for me. I am also a former hot yoga girl. I didn't say this, but I do have a yoga teacher certification. So I am a yoga teacher. So bundling up or turning a space heater on. I have a space heater on in our little home gym, or having a warm space to come home to is really critical for me. We can unpack like all these things about thermogenesis and about my basal body temperature, but let's not. And so maybe for you that's warmth. Maybe it's having a space that's a little bit more cool. I don't know, but it really helps me. Again, with music, playlists that make me want to move my body. I have tons of them in all kinds of moods and flavors for myself, and I really let music, and I don't have great taste in music anymore. I think I used to have much better taste. Now I just want music. I want to feel music in my body. I want it to move me. I want it to make me feel like dancing and moving. And so I love letting it do the hard part of getting started for me. Number 5, find a book or podcast that you love and want to listen to. Forget the movement and just go for the listening. Number 6, it is one step, one stretch, one rep at a time. And usually, just like with everything else, just like where I am right now in my life, the hardest part is getting started. So sometimes I'll tell myself that, oh, I'll just go for a walk and it'll just be down the street, just to the stop sign. Or I'll go for a hike and I can turn back anytime I want, right? Like just give myself that carte blanche. I don't have to do anything. Or I'll start a workout and it's just one set of push-ups. And the deal is I always, always stay for more. Bribery works with children, works with adults too. Sometimes I bribe myself with my favorite little fizzy water afterwards, or a fancy tea, or if I'm going for a hike, it'll be like a little coffee with my favorite protein powder that's a little bit sweet. So it's like this little pumpkin spice latte. If I'm feeling really chilly, like I could have a bath afterwards, like whatever that bribery is. And then, and this is the real advice here. It's that I hate to say it, but you just do it. You say that you're doing it, and then you do it. Every summer, my husband and I spend time at a local quarry doing some cliff jumping, and I'm always interested in watching the psychology of people as they jump off these they've been safe cliffs-ish, into the water, and there's so much overthinking that happens that creates reticent, and the more you overthink, the more reticent you become, the less likely you are to do it, and so there's something to be said for just jumping. Um, which is true of life too, right? Like this is also advice for life. And I have found that all of these things together form, I guess, what you would call discipline, though it's really just an organization of my life around making things as easy as possible, because something I've noticed about myself is that I experience a lot of friction in this life. I experience a lot of things feeling hard and difficult to do, hurdles needing to be jumped. And so, as much smooth going as I can create for myself, that really matters to me. And so walking is such a great entry point, and I'm hoping we'll see how life shakes out to have an offering around walking here in a couple of months, because it's been such a gift to me and I'd love to go on your walks with you. Um I'm gonna take a little sip of my coffee here. How gross is that I'm just doing that right into the microphone? Let's see where we are in my notes. Yeah, so let's kind of talk about this journey that I went on 9 months ago and not knowing exactly how I was going to put it together, and teachers. There are so many programs out there, and I'm sure there are programs I'm not going to mention. I am sure that you have programs that you want to recommend, though I feel really content with where I am. And I just want to say that there's a whole world of people helping other people exercise out there, and that so much of this piece of the conversation for me is going to go back to finding someone that works for your body and the way that you like to move. And you might have to try a couple of things to figure out what way you like to move and what teachers work for you. What I have landed on throughout trying a couple of different programs is that I really like building my own programming. Again, I'm a registered yoga teacher, a nutritionist, and my background is in biology, anatomy, and physical anthropology. So I have a lot of knowledge to back this up. I'm also, you guys know I love some research, right? I'll spend 10 hours researching a vacuum. So know a little bit about this stuff and feel confident in my ability to create programming for myself. And what I've found over trying a couple of programs is that oftentimes they don't meet some of my body needs, and that even if I am following someone else's program, I have to be really cognizant of my own circumstances, context, bio-individuality, and make sure that I am tailoring that program for what I know or what I think I know that I need. And I think that this is really true of nutrition too, and why I've been really hesitant to jump into the space as like a practicing nutritionist, despite being able to do that. Might be doing that in the future. We'll see. Is that we all, right, our bodies have been shaped by the way we moved and ate in childhood, our gut microbiome, by the emotional connections that we had or didn't have that changed aspects of our biology, by how we're eating now, by where we're living, how we're moving, all of these pollutants, former injuries, autoimmune diseases. We are and really amazing stuff too, where we are strong, where the things we love are, the movements that have sustained us and brought us joy in life. All of those are very different for every individual body, and nobody can know your body better than you. You live here. I live here in this body, and I know this body. And so I believe that it is incumbent on me to really honor that and to work to strengthen that muscle. There it is. To strengthen that muscle of interoception so that I can be my own best trainer, even if I'm following a program, and that I can be like, ooh, when I do. So here's a good example. And I'm sure that there might be some reasons for this that my body needs to fix or to find a better stasis around. And I'm not going to get into that, right? Like, because one of the things I don't want doing this perfectly to be the enemy of enjoying doing this. And that can happen really quickly. So, great example of this for me is that if I do a twisting movement after doing deadlifts, there's a space in my back that gets a little tweaky. So I don't do loaded twisting movements after deadlifts. It's really simple. There are other times when I can do loaded twisty movements because I think they're super important for spinal mobility and for all of this great stuff. I just don't do them after any kind of deadlift because it doesn't work for my body. And maybe there's a great reason for that I could fix, but I don't want to get stuck on that. I just want to make sure that I am following the cues of my body. And we've already talked about her a little bit. Dr. Susie Spurlock, Dr. Susie Squats on Instagram has some really great guidance in her program and also on Instagram around following pain signals. With green as go, orange is like be aware, and red as stop, that not all pain is immediately just absolutely, grind to a halt. Again, I say this, check with your doctor, checked with your physical therapist. Dr. Susie is a physical therapist, which is part of why I think her program is so great. But for me, it's really about finding what I need for my body and what I enjoy. So the other thing that I will say this at the outset before I share some of these people with you, I like a higher intensity, and I don't mean high intensity interval training. I just mean a higher intensity, heavier, more focused weightlifting program I've done some great Pilates programs. I usually do Pilates, I don't know, once a week to kind of supplement all of this, sometimes a little bit more, infusing some isometric and Pilates based movement into my lifting routine. But I like a pretty straightforward lifting program. There's some people that have I don't even know how to define it, and this isn't going to be the right definition, but some softer movement that is a little bit flowier. I've done a lot of yoga in my life. I infuse a lot of great yoga into my warm-ups and cool downs and evening wind down routines, but I want something a little hard hitting. And so I'll just say that for myself. And none of this, you got to find what you need for your own bio-individual body, my friends. So I started with Lizette Pompa. She's fantastic. She lives in Sweden. She's from Mexico. She's, yoga teacher, transitioned into lifting, and she's very accessible from both price point and from being new to lifters, and has a wide range of programming on the app Playbook. I think it's a great entry point. Very accessible to see if this is something you want to do. Very scalable. Played around with some of Steph Rose. Steph and her husband Jay do some incredible mobility stuff out at Phase 6 movement outside of Austin, Texas, and did her entire program. And I love training for mobility again, right? Like I want a lot of healthy rotation in my joints and my spine. That's especially that longevity piece, that practical piece, that moving in other areas of my life beyond my workout piece. And I think she is just the queen of mobility. However, I found that for whatever reason, her workouts left me feeling a touch depleted afterwards. And every once in a while, a workout just leave me depleted, but I just didn't feel great or energetic, and neither did my husband. And so that just wasn't fully for me, but I've infused some of her thoughts into the way that I work out. Um, Ben Bruno. Ben Bruno is a trainer out of LA. He has some really cool strength training programs, and I have tried his trilogy for men. I think it is awesome. I love his workout plans and some of the exercises that he does. I do find that I don't like the way he stacks a whole body workout, so I generally do just whole body workout days versus a push pull legs arms. I really prefer engaging my whole body. It's what feels good to me every day. I don't like doing just an isolated day. I've tried that in other programs. Again, this is just for me, it doesn't have to be for you. And sometimes I feel like he does too much of the same exercise in a row. There's a great example of this that my husband and I have talked about. I don't like doing two balancing exercises in a superset, which is where you're doing kind of two exercises, different muscle groups back to back. Um, because I find that it just really drains me. And so I like to do something steady and then something that might be a little asymmetrical and off balance. But yeah, and so sometimes I'll kind of play around with Ben Bruno's stuff. And then there are two that I don't have as much experience in, but I have done and I think are incredible. Number one is Dr. Susie's Spurlock's Supple Strength program, which I think is awesome. She's a physical therapist. The way that she thinks about things is absolutely incredible. I've tried to get her on the show. Her program is amazing. There's a home one and a gym one, and the gym one could be scaled for a home gym one too if you have more equipment. It's awesome. She has a whole team of PTs. There's some one-on-one and a lot more coaching for form. And something that I find that everybody that I mentioned prior to this, they're not good at cueing and coming out of yoga and really wanting that interoception. I love good cues. And so some of that comes with Susie, and I've kind of put some of that together myself. I mean, even the position of your foot can really change the cascade of engagement across your muscles. And then there's the incredible Cara Duvall and her range program, which incorporates a little bit of weights, but a lot of Pilates and just really slow, gorgeous, intentional movement. I cannot recommend her program enough. And I like a little bit more intensity. It's just me. It's that thoroughbred thing. Um, and all of this I scale, right? I scale this based on energy, symptoms, what I feel like is going on in my life for my body. And what I have gotten in turn is a complete transformation. And I want to say this too. I have never hopped on a scale during this journey. I have not taken before or afters, though I do take selfies. If you follow me on Instagram, you might see them sometimes. I have never measured anything. I have clothes, and certainly how they fit is a sort of form of measurement. But all of this has just been, well, all of this has mostly been for me to get strong, to feel good. And then there's the piece that has been about vanity that I've already talked about. And I really can't tell you how much this journey has meant to me. We are capable of carrying things, and sometimes when we are given a load in life or in the gym, it asks our bodies to learn, to clarify, to refine, to to push, to overcome. And that has been such a gift of feeling capable, which is often my word of the year. I always just want to feel capable and to see that dramatic shift, right? When I toss a bale of hay, it feels completely different in my body before, right? I am training to carry what life gives to me. To be prepared to pick up heavy things and to have trust in myself that I will show up for me. And as somebody who is very prone to a freeze response, I've talked about this too. The idea that I will show up for me, that I will not collapse on me is absolutely vital. And walking has taught me this, and lifting has really taught me this, because you are asking yourself when that weight feels, when you're at the bottom of a squat and you just like, I don't know how I am going to get this from point A to point B, and you just dig in and push, you are learning something about what it takes to get through this life that will very much carry outside of the gym. And I think that this process for me has been about letting myself be transformed, truly letting myself experience transformation and going into this portal of complete uncertainty that is very scary, that feels very precarious. With Josh having lost his job and us being kind of in a very tight spot. I know that I can pick up this load. I know that I can carry this. And moving through chronic illness too, I know that I can carry this. I know that I can do this. And that this has been such a gift for me to move. Movement matters to me so deeply. And movement matters to our bodies in ways that I think we scarcely understand, just to harken back to that idea of shifting baselines, that we were meant to move. I know that I have a split listener base, but as women, we picked up and carried our children, and I think about that too. I think about that when I put on a weighted pack, when I'm walking, when I load my walks, which we didn't talk about, and do some rucking. I think about the fact that I might want a child here in the was the nearer future. Now I don't know what it is, and I wanna be able to carry that kid, on my back, with me into all of my adventures, and so that was a big load that we carried. We carried food, we carried kindling, wood, all of this stuff, and that was a part of our life, and it's true what Katie Bowman says, that when we outsource our movement, there are other people in the world that are moving for us, and I think we've gotten a chance to explore some of that on this podcast, and I always hope that we'll be exploring more, but movement matters, right? And to go back to that etymology, movement is the change of position, the passage from place to place. Oh, and that's what I'm in right now, right? I'm in this passage from place to place. But it's also where I am when I'm at the bottom of a squat, or when I'm doing a step down, or when I'm doing an Arnold press, or when I'm on a big hike, or when I'm on a short walk, or when I'm tossing a bale of hay. And it's just such an honor to co-create with this body. I don't always speak as highly of it as I could, but it really is an honor. Um, I think that's pretty close to what I wanted to say. I think that if this really resonates, maybe we could go a little bit deeper. And so let this be an invitation that I would love to hear from you. Last little piece I'll add is that I really do think that I've seen such awesome growth in my muscles because of my diet, because of the way that I fuel myself. And I have not been super intentional about my macros. I did actually decrease fat a little bit, and I try to make sure that I get adequate protein. But again, with my stomach, it can be a little tricky. And I have added more carbs back in than I've had in a long time. And I think all of that has resulted in a body recomposition that is absolutely amazing. In some ways, I wish I had taken before and after pictures, because it's pretty profound to see the difference in how I look, but I don't think any of that could communicate the difference in how I feel. And so fuel is a really important part of this. And I think the nutrient density of my diet has really allowed me to put on muscle with a lot of ease and not a lot of consideration for macros or anything like that. But if this podcast resonates with you, if there's something in here you want to go deeper on, I want to hear about that. I want to hear about how movement has mattered to you. I want to hear about your passage from place to place, your change of position right now. And I want to thank you. I want to thank you for being a listener, for supporting this podcast. Again, there are links in the show notes for ways to support me if you feel called to do so. And a reminder that the best support is just to leave a rating and review, and make sure that you subscribe so you can catch the awesome episodes we have coming up, including the one next week with Bonnie Sweet and her new book out next Tuesday on muscle. the stuff that moves us and why it matters, which you can pre-order if you want to keep up with this. And with that, just my eternal gratitude for you being here in this shift for me, and your tenderness, I hope, and grace for me, for any mistakes I might have made in this episode or anything else as I move through this, and let's move together. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Mind, Body, and Soil podcast. If what you found resonated with you, may I ask that you share it with your friends or leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts? This act of reciprocity helps others find Mind, Body, and Soil. If you're looking for more, you can find us at groundworkcollective.com and at Kate_Kavanaugh, that's KATE_KAVANAUGH on Instagram. I would like to give a very special thank you to China and Seth Kent of the band All Right for the clips from their beautiful song Over the Edge from their album The Crucible. You can find them at All Right on Instagram and wherever you listen to music.